Hi Grade 8s, these are the evidence of learning solutions for week 4, lesson 1, triangles. Now for the perimeter of a triangle, there is no specific formula, but just like when we calculate the perimeter of any other shape, all we need to do is add up the sides. So very simply, the perimeter of a triangle just equals the sum of all three sides. Now the formula for the area of a triangle might be a little bit trickier, but I'm going to show you an easy way to remember it. So the general formula for the area of a triangle is a half BH, or another way of remembering it is BH over 2. Now B stands for the base of the triangle. So generally we're looking at the bottom of the triangle, like in these three diagrams below. And H stands for the vertical height of the triangle. And a really important point here is that height must always be perpendicular, which means it makes a right angle with the base of the triangle. So if we look at our first triangle on the left here, our right angle triangle, we can see that the height and the base form a right angle. If we look at our second triangle here, once again we can see that our height and our base form a right angle, which means that it's perpendicular. And our third triangle here, our scalene triangle, while it does look a little bit different to the previous triangles, if we follow this base along here, we will see once again that it does form a right angle with the height. So when we're looking at triangles and we're trying to determine what the base and what the height are, the height must always be the vertical, perpendicular height. A common mistake that students make is that instead of using the height value, sometimes they will use the hypotenuse, which is this longer side here. So it's really important to remember the height is the vertical, perpendicular height, not the hypotenuse, which is the longest diagonal side. Okay, so looking at our formula, A equals half BH, or BH over 2. So that means we multiply the base and the height, and then we divide by 2. Now I'd like to explain how we reach this formula, why we actually multiply the base and the height, and then divide by 2. The reason why we divide by 2 is because each of these three triangles here, and any triangle, is exactly half of a quadrilateral, or a four-sided shape. So it could be half a rectangle, half a square, or half a parallelogram. Okay, so looking at this triangle here. Now I'm going to make a duplicate copy of this triangle, so the exact same triangle. I'm going to paste it right next to it, and I'm going to rotate this triangle around, and as you should be able to see, it makes a perfect rectangle. And if you remember the formula for a rectangle, the area of a rectangle is length times width. So looking at the rectangle, the long side is 12 meters. So we would have 12 meters times by our width, which is 10 meters. So if we're calculating the rectangle, 12 meters times 10 meters would be 120 meters squared. Now that is the whole area of the rectangle. But if we're calculating the area of a triangle, all we want is half of that area. And so that's where the formula comes from. Instead of length times width, it's really length times width divide by 2. And so the area of one of those triangles is 60 meters squared. And that's where the formula for a triangle is derived from. So the area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2. And looking at our diagram, our base at the bottom here is 10 meters, which was the width of the rectangle, and the height of this triangle is 12 meters, which was the length of the rectangle. So instead of using length and width, in triangles, we use the terms base and height. So hopefully you can see that a triangle is exactly half of a rectangle. And that is why we divide by 2 to calculate the area of a triangle. Okay, now let's look at an example of perimeter to begin with. Now, as we remember, the formula for perimeter of a triangle is just the sum of all sides. So we need to add all of our sides together. However, looking at our sides, we have 6 centimeters, 30 millimeters, and 45 millimeters. So before we add anything together, we need to convert so that all of the side lengths are in the same units. Now, obviously the odd unit there is the 6 centimeters, so let's convert that 6 centimeters into millimeters. And if you remember your conversions from centimeters to millimeters, we need to times by 10. And so very simply, 6 centimeters in millimeters is 60 millimeters. Now we can actually solve the perimeter. So the perimeter equals the sum of sides, and all we need to do now is add together all of the side lengths. 30 millimeters plus 45 millimeters plus 60 millimeters. And so our final answer for perimeter will be 135 millimeters. And as always with perimeter, we don't need to worry about squared units because we're just adding the units together. So the perimeter of that triangle is 135 millimeters. All right, now let's look at area. So for the area of a triangle, remember we use our formula, area equals base times height over 2. Personally, I prefer this version of the formula, but you can definitely use either formula at any time. So looking at this triangle here, the base, or the bottom of the triangle, is 3 meters, and the height, which means the vertical perpendicular height, is 1.6 meters. And we can see here that it does make a right angle with the base, and so we know that that is the correct value to use. So substituting into our formula, our base is 3.0 meters, and our height is 1.6 meters. And we divide all of that by 2. So solving the top of that fraction, we end up with 4.8 meters squared, and we do of course still need to divide by 2. So 4.8 meters squared divided by 2, our final answer will be 2.4 meters squared. And that is how you calculate the perimeter and area of a triangle.